Tapatu kia rangi nui e tui honei, tapatu kia papa e whakahurangi nei, tūngau atu kia hine nui te pō kia hara mai ki runga, ki raro, ki roto, ki waho, ki ngā kaukau o te pairangi, kia paua ki ngā oha o tipua, a o mātua tipuna, kia tama i te ao mārama, tūturu whakamaua, kia tīna, tīna, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. Tēnā koutou katoa, e hika mā koutou e whakarongo maina i o koutou kāinga, i o koutou wāhi mahi hoki. Karanga mai koutou te iwi Māori o tira ngā iwi take take o te ao, me o koutou maunga, o koutou awa, o koutou tūpuna, koutou e whawhai tonu ana i te mana motu hake. Tēnā koe hoki e te māreikura, e te mokopuna o te awa wanganui, i te kai whakahihiko i a tātou i tēnei ata. Tēnā koe Meri, e hoa. Kia
Kia ora
ora.
tātou. Kia ora tātou, kia ora.
Tēnā tātou i te whānau. Welcome everybody to our webinar series, Intergenerational Intimacies, Exploring Our Intergenerational Relationships with Kai. Ko Haylee Koroi tōku ingoa. Ko whakarongorua te maunga, ko awa nui te awa, ko ngā tuki mata whaorua te waka, ko mokonu i arangi te marae, ko te ngahe ngahe te hapu, ko ngā puhi ko te rarawa, ko ngā tikahu, ko te pōpoto o ku iwi, ko au te kaiārahi mo te kaupapa, kai Māori, kai ora ki toi tangata. So excited to have you here, Meri, and to have everybody listening in. This webinar series has emerged out of the paper Intergenerational Intimacies, a whakapapa conceptualization of Kai, authored by myself and Hannah Burgess and published earlier this year, which is crazy. What a year it's been. And while we were excited about bringing our work, the culmination of our work and our experience into publishing of the paper, I'm even more excited, I think, to explore alongside our whānau and our hapori and people like Meri what a whakapapa conceptualization of Kai might look like and sound like and feel like out there in the world alongside those that we love. So we're going to be talking with Meri. Meri, thank you so much for being here with us, e hoa, around the kaupapa of kaiwaiata and memory. Meri's work, not just with waiata, but in other realms, is quite extensive. So there's a lot of places we could have taken today's kōrero, and where we end up is really anybody's guess. But I'm just really excited to be here with you. But in all sincerity, it has been really lovely, Meri, to read through your thesis, He Whiringa Muka, the relationship between the Wanganui River, marae, and waiata. And to see the way that you've brought this archive of waiata and kōrero tuku iho and the kawa of Wanganui to life through your work. Engaging with your work, I think I really began to understand deeply why waiata are so important, especially within the kai space, because they are a portal to our tūpuna, and they help us to feel how they felt, to understand how they felt, and they reveal a way of seeing and being with the world. And kai is a deeply important part of that world, their world and our world as well, the world that they sing about and that they remember and that they want future generations to remember. So I feel like your work speaks to the intention of this webinar series, which is to continue to expand our intergenerational understandings of kai through whakapapa and whanaungatanga. So yeah, if you would like to engage with Meri's work, her thesis, or any of her other written works, you can Google her. It's a bit of a flex. Or you can follow the links in the chat, as well as there will also be the link to our original paper, Intergenerational Intimacies, for those who want to understand more about the origins of this webinar series. So with that being said, I would love to invite our audience and you too, Meri, to share a waiata or a memory of a waiata that has stayed with you, that has like really left an impression on you. Um, think about who you were with and where you were or how you felt. If you could share it with us in the chat, that would be so cool. I'll give you a few moments. And I'll also start so everyone can gather their thoughts. Um, so as long as I can remember, we've had this whānau album, which was recorded by my auntie Nolene when she worked at My FM, and she took the opportunity to bring my whole whānau into the My FM studio, and they recorded a whānau album, and it's um, it's really beautiful because it has my nan's voice recorded on this album. And because she's not been around for a long time, it's just so amazing to be able to hear her voice, given that she's not physically here anymore. Okay, it's saying that the chat is disabled. So I'll just see if I can fix that. Do we want to give that a go now? Okay, awesome. It's working. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora tātou.
Awesome. If you want to keep sending through your beautiful waiata, and in the interim, I'm going to ask Meri if she can share a waiata or a memory of a waiata, and also introduce yourself e hoa. Kia ora.
Mōrena tātou, kano i te mihi ki a koutou, kano i te mihi i Hayley, mō tō karakia tēnei, i hui hui nei, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko waiau, ko Meri Haami tōku ingoa. He uri o te kāhui maunga, ko te ati anui a paparangi, ko Ngāti Rangi, ko ngā rauru ki tahi, ko Ngāti Tūari tō ngā iwi, ko Ngāti Rua ka te hapu, ko Rārana te marae, ko te Paurongo, te marae, ko ka rangahau au ki Tūtama Wahine o Taranaki. Tēnā tātou katoa. So kia ora everyone. Thank you so much for the karakia, for opening the space. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to be here. Woo! Like, it's great. I'm privileged and honored to be here and to be in conversation about what I consider your seminal paper, Intergenerational Intimacies, which I use all the time. Thank you both for writing it, because it's become very foundational in how I think and conceptualize not only whakapapa, but also as it relates to waiata. So in terms of a waiata that I can remember where I learnt and how I felt, I don't think I'll be talking about it today, but I think I've been spending a lot of time with it lately. It's an ori ori, and it's written by a wahine of my hapu called Te Rewa, and she was unable to give birth. She was unable to conceive her own child. So what she did was she created a rākau whakapākoko, a wooden doll, and she made an ori ori for it. So it was her child. And it has all the conventions of ori ori. So ori ori, people say lullabies, but actually it's an instructional song. It gives your child purpose for its life. But one of the key things I love about this ori ori is it maps. So it's actually a mapping device. It maps certain areas within the Whanganui River where her child can go fish, where her child can get the kai and the mara, what waripuni she can go to, or her child can go to. And I think that's just amazing to think about ori ori as mapping. And so I've been thinking about this ori ori for a long time. And recently it's come up again. And I remember I was learning it in a wānanga on my marae, and it's really long. And some of the places that are in the ori ori are kind of lost to time. So my hope is that the future generations, myself being a part of that, will help to try and find those places. Because they're somewhere, they still exist. We just got to find the memory of those places. So yeah, kia ora. It's great to be here.
Tēnā koe, Meri. Thanks for that, sharing that. Just going to read through some of the chat responses. One of my favorite memories from Pew Pew is learning the tau parapara Maota i te rangi with my mama. Naomi said, I remember all the waiata that we used to sing when my nan was sick. I was only young, but those waiata are ingrained in my tinana and wairua.
Mm.
Beautiful. A waiata that has stuck with me was Mania Poto, my cousins, the Hōtere whānau sing it with such warmth and aroha.
Mm.
Awe. Tēnā koutou mea koutou toha toha inga i a koutou whē ako. Awesome. We're just going to carry on and get into the kaupapa. I was saying to Meri before I jumped on that like Wanganui is a whole world and Kai is a whole world and Waiata is a whole world. And so how do we kind of talk about these really complex things in a way that's clear and that provides people with clarity? So we're going to do our best to do that and kind of just scaffold some of the questions so that we understand a little bit more together. This is also a learning process for me as well. So yeah, I'm reflecting on some of the dominant influences in my entry into the Kai space, which really are memories of my nan and her mara. And she had she had a scarecrow, which is something that I always remember. But I think what I realized through memories of my nan and her garden was that I had an extensive legacy of relationships with Kai that I was a part of, even though that had been obscured maybe through my generation because we're buying most of our food from supermarkets and whatnot. But I think through my nan, what I realized was actually, no, I have our whānau has a whakapapa to Kai that's extensive, that extends for generations and generations. And even though that may have been disrupted more recently, there's no reason, I suppose, to dismiss the mana of that whakapapa. So I guess I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your mahi in the waiata space and who or what nurtured you into the kaupapa of waiata.
Yeah, so what nurtured me into waiata? So it came up recently because I was attending a webinar about a book that was talking about Mauna Kea and the mele that were composed during that time. And there is a photo, there's footage somewhere of me at Pakaitore, the land occupation in 1995, singing. So there's footage somewhere. Dad has it somewhere. But and then later I would be on the Pakaitore Historic Reserve Board. It was really weird, kind of not weird. It was very purposeful, I think, my way my tūpuna had set it up. That my love of waiata, music generally from everywhere, it set up my purpose in life. Even when I was young, I didn't really know it at the time. So that came up and it got me thinking because there were tamariki on the Mona performing mele, composing mele, getting into music. That was the opening into music, was through actually protest and through resilience in their environment and on their whenua. So it got me thinking. I was like, oh, I remember. I think there's a picture of me somewhere. And I remember singing waiata for the first time at my nan's, I think 50th it would have been, and it was held at my mum's house, I remember, and I remember getting up and wanting to sing. I've been described though as a 5, 6, 7, 8 kid, so I was I love performing. So my first entry into waiata was actually there, but it became kind of dormant as I grew because I kind of got more into just music generally. I played in bands. I went through a goth phase, and I was studying to be a session musician in the end. I was very much in high school, very determined to become something in the music industry. Don't know what that would have been. I like to think I was going to be like a Beyonce, Yes, it was Nanny Angel's 60th, not 50th. But I'd like to think that I was going to do that, but no. But I ended up studying to be a session musician. And what that entails is you basically learn to sight read. Sight read Western music. Just want to clarify that. You sight read Western music. That's jazz harmony. It's very technical and a lot of terminology around music, but just know that it wasn't waiata. And I was kind of the person that you would call to come into a studio, sing a part or sight read a part, and then I'd get paid and I'd leave. or I would songwrite for another artist, a much more famous artist. That was kind of what my job prospects were kind of going to look like after my music degree. But it wasn't until my third year I started to learn te reo again. I started to read decolonizing methodologies. It's seminal work, you know. I read that whole thing, and the 1999 copy, the first edition, and it changed my life. So that nurtured me and started making me think more about, okay, well, what is my music? What's lying dormant that hasn't been reawakened again? So I read that, and I decided to do an honours, and I did it on waiata aroha of the Wanganui River. I was looking at how ethnomusicologists, we'll probably talk about that a little bit later maybe, but ethnomusicologists are people that study world music. I say that in quotations very loosely, but they study music that is not considered Western art music or popular music, the top 40, what we would consider top 40 music. And I noticed that there was a severe lack of kaupapa Māori divas in that area. So I needed to study it. So I was like, okay, well, this has been so neglected. You know, there are these people that are not Māori who are talking as if they know. And this is kind of it was in opposition to what I'd learned growing up about waiata. So it didn't feel right. So I studied it, and then I just continued. And then it wasn't until my master's I actually came back to my hapu, and it wasn't really much about music as it was around the theoretical groundwork for why sometimes waiata stays within a hapu and why sometimes it goes beyond a hapu. And that was really key learning about knowledge transmission, about discernment, about what you want to give out. Because once you give it out, you can't take it back in. And that was called kaiponu, the idea to withhold. The idea is that you withhold knowledge to protect its sanctity. And you'll find kaiponu in the imagery of a lot of Wanganui carvings. Some of the people are holding their tongues, and that's called kaiponu. And so it's a very much an ethical code around knowledge protection from Wanganui River. So I learned a lot about that. And then that's what carried into my PhD, actually, and that's where I learned a bulk of Wanganui waiata was throughout my PhD. So I kind of ran in parallel. But from the start, I look back and I was just going to be a session musician. And I got all of my training in Western musical systems, which I completely don't really, like I can understand that language, but I rarely use it now because it doesn't articulate waiata in the best way. Yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. That leads perfectly into the next question. But in Intergenerational Intimacies, the paper we talk about, when we talk about kai, we are talking about the food we eat, but through whakapapa, the concept of kai evokes the many layers of whanaungatanga that constitute kai. So it's not just kai, it's te taiao, it's the wai, it's the community that harvests and nurtures the kai. Because yes, kai is this physical hua, but it's also its wider relations. And I think bringing these two different scales of discussion into our vision is so important. Like seeing whakapapa and its expansiveness while not losing the essence or the modi of the physical thing we're referring to. And similarly, how have you come to understand waiata through your mahi as something that like contains melodies and composition, but simultaneously is like reflective of place and like taiao and whakapapa and people? How do you kind of like hold those two scales? Yeah. So how have you come to understand waiata through your mahi?
I've come to understand waiata as memory now. So I've come to understand that waiata has always been the way that our people have captured memory, whether that's collective memory or internal memory. But it's a way of recording. It's our kind of historiography. But the things that make it very different is that it's very genealogical because it all comes from whakapapa. Whakapapa is not only this lyrical device that is present in all waiata, but it's very much at its core. You need to remember. So whakapapa is something that you need to remember, so it's very innate and across all waiata, not just lyrics, but just in terms of the purpose, its function, but also environment. So I have this quote up and I really wanted to share it today, but it's by Takiri Smith, and I highly recommend looking at this. This is it's called it's from the book He Ara Ura Ora, and it's about Māori pre-colonial conceptions of trauma. But he talks about memory, and he talks about how memory is located in the ngākau. And I think typically we hear ngākau and we go, oh, the heart, yay. But actually, it's actually more than that. It's the central organs of the body. And the ngākau, it's not just the heart, it's everywhere in here. And you get that feeling, something hits you, and you get the feeling in your puku, that's your ngākau, And so memory sits there. Māori conceptualizations of memory is that it sits in your ngākau. It's the gut, it's the stomach, it's the central organs of your human body. So I'll read this quote, but this is how waiata kind of came to, waiata and whakapapa and taiao all converged for me. So, and I quote, memory can be located within the human body, within the environment, within objects, within the realm of ancestors, within a mountain, within a river. Mountains and rivers can be regarded as living beings with memory. As humans, we have memory, but this is connected to collective memories in the present, past, and to our environments. For Māori, memory recall is triggered as a human response within the ngākau. An individual carries their whakapapa with them and is therefore always connected to the external environment, as whakapapa began with the sky parent, the earth parent, and the creation of all things, human and non-human within the environment, end quote. And that's also gives me a little bit of a glimpse into, you were talking, Hayley, about waiata being this portal into time. It's time portal. We can feel their emotions when we're seeing this waiata. And as people have pointed out in the chat, you feel the warmth, the aroha. It's amazing that waiata is able to capture those memories, emotional memories as well. And the reason why memory and memory recall is settled within the ngākau, there's a system called mātou that Kaiārahi Smith talks about. And I feel like, so this is how I have thought more about waiata and connecting with everything, with whakapapa. It's actually memory. It's how we think about memory, and that perhaps we need to change some of our conceptualizations around memory, and that it doesn't just sit in the roro. Yeah, it also is physical, it's tangible. And I also think that's why we have the feeling of being in the mara, or the feeling of hoputuna, of going for tuna. That's why they feel almost like we've done it before. It's almost like why we feel so familiar with it. We recognize it even at a cellular level, and then even, in terms of memory recall within our ngākau.
Yeah. Beautiful. I know that after writing the paper, after writing Intergenerational Intimacies, I actually started to have a lot more memories. Like a lot more memories were like surfacing of people through the kai that I was eating. I'm just like wondering if you've experienced, like, if a lot of memories have been triggered or recalled through, I suppose, like your engagement with a lot of the waiata through your thesis.
Yeah, there are some waiata that, like, for example, there's a waiata called Te Waio Wanganui that was I didn't, so like we had to teach some kids it. We were teaching some rangatahi and tamariki the song, and I didn't realize that I'd learnt it before until I started like practicing with the kids. I was like, oh, I know this song. Like it was just, it was really wild to me. But then it also, I think at an even bigger level, when I was looking at my whakapapa line, I have a tūpuna called Te Urumutu Te Mitara, and he was the custodian of a lot of utapiharo, which are lamprey weirs, and he also looked after Te Pāoroa, which is single-fenced eel weirs on the Wanganui River. So he looked after a couple of them that were situated once upon a time around one of my marae. I didn't realize that I had such a strong connection with Kai as you were talking about. You didn't realize that you had this intergenerational connection with Kai. I didn't realize that either until the thesis because I was looking at my whakapapa and I was like, oh, I wonder what he did. Wonder what he was up to. Turns out he went to the Māori land court, the native land court at the time, and when he was talking about his ahika, his claims he brought up his utupiharo. He brought up his te pāoroa. And he was saying, I look after these. I've looked after these for generations, my whānau here, for our hapu. And didn't know it, but in the end, hinaki, so nets for to catch all of the kai, and also te pāoroa became a huge conceptual structure for my thesis. So it's almost like I find myself in these strange, I don't know, reverberations over time where my tūpuna kind of set up something and then I find the path that they've set up for me in some way within my own work. Te Pāoroa being one of them. But that's kind of reawakened something that I knew to be true the entire time, that I had connections with the awa and a kai in terms of kai. That I knew I did, but I also didn't know the intricacies of how, and it was like it was reawakened for me. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We're going to move now to Wanganui. And I love how you just whakamana i tō whakapapa, and I think it's such an exemplar for me about what that could look like. I know kaupapa Māori is such this big thing, and to apply it within a context that is so meaningful and personal, I think. Obviously, it's probably really hard for lots of reasons, but also the context in which it probably should be, it's worth the difficulty, the struggle of that. But in the opening of your thesis, you share the whakatauki ngā muka a taura whiria hine ngākau, the fibre of the plaited rope of hine ngākau. Do you just want to briefly touch on that whakatauki and what it means to you and your whānau? Because it informs the name of your thesis.
Yeah, so that whakatauki has pretty much guided a lot of my decision making and also how to conceptualize things. I like this idea that we are rebinding what was attempted to be severed. I have this idea in my head that colonization always aims to sever, always aims to disconnect us, it always aims to displace us, it always tries to disconnect us. So if we don't know who we are, then we can't be strong. So it always tries to weaken us. And I like this idea that we are trying to weave things back, rebind and make it even stronger. So that's why I always try to think about when I'm writing, how can this enhance what is there, but also rebind it to make it stronger, make it more capable. So this whakatauki, ngā taura whiria hine ngākau, talks about one of the three principal tūpuna of the Wanganui River. So the river back in the day was divided into three parts. So you had hine ngākau at the upper reaches of the Wanganui River towards Kororo Paihu. Then you go down and you had Tamaupoko. And that's kind of where my marae sits in that middle reaches area. And then you go down to Pūtiki, you go down to Wanganui, all of those areas, you had Tūpoho. These were siblings. So all three of them were siblings. And I think it was hine ngākau who married Tamahina from Ngāti Tūwaretoa, and they kind of bound all of the Wanganui River together. And that's why people say he taura whiria hine ngākau. Her marriage to Tamahina brought peace to the Wanganui River and bound the Wanganui River together to make it strong and more capable against anything. So these were three siblings. The mother of those three siblings is Ruaka, and that is the namesake of my hapu, Ngāti Ruaka. And so that's why when I was thinking about when I try to write, I always try to work in that vein and always try to draw on that whakatauki as inspiration, but also some I guess the modi of the heart or kaupapa, what I'm trying to do. Because she managed to strengthen the Wanganui River, I can in my little space that I'm in too, and contribute to something a bit bigger for the collective, is my thinking. But yeah, that's the kōrero on Hinengākau.
Awesome. Lovely. I'm just thinking, but in your thesis, you write, and this is just a summary, but He Taurā Whiri, the plaited rope, draws on Wanganui oral tradition and histories of connectedness. It also refers to the various materials grown from the Wanganui River that have been honed by Wanganui iwi over generations for many technological uses, from refining muka of the harakeke to building formidable pātuna. Firstly, I love that you write here about pātuna as technology. And I think part of the reframing that maybe we have to do as Māori is reframing what technology is, because our tūpuna, we're very technological people. But I know you've already briefly touched on it. But what is pātuna? And because just for those that don't know, Meri used the hinaki as a framework for her PhD. So yeah, what is the significance of pātuna and hinaki within Wanganui?
Yes. Let's go pātuna 101. So pātuna is an earwear. It's kind of, if you can look up on a picture, because there was an expedition done by McDonald in 1920 something. But he took some pictures and you can have a look. But so if the river's kind of like this, they look like fences. They're kind of scattered all along the awa. And how I understand it is that you build it when the tide's really low in the summer, and that it should be strong for autumn. So when all of the tuna heke are going out. And so there's definitely seasonal time. So like, again, the engineering, if you look at a pātuna in low tide, because there are pictures there at Parakino, amazing. Like it is technology to me. I'm like, this is an engineering feat. How did they come up with this? Amazing. So like there's pātuna. And pātuna, as I understand it, and like multiple earwears, but Te Pāarua is the name for a specifically Wanganui single fenced earwear. And they're a little bit smaller. You won't find them as stacked up as pātuna, but what they do is that they work with the rapids of the awa to try and negotiate the tuna to come into the hinaki with the net. So you've got this big fence, it's like this, and then behind the fence, you'll have your hinaki, your net. And you can have a look at some of the pictures, some of the sketches. Some of the sketches are very intricate, and they have every part has a name. Every part has its own name. Everything is very important. So you'll have the fence, you'll have the hinaki. The attachment between Te Pāarua and the hinaki is called the poha, and it's called like a funnel. And the idea of the hinaki is that it has a big kind of like opening and then a little opening. So a big opening at the front, little opening at the back. And that was for conservation purposes, because you don't want to get the babies. You don't want to get the tamariki. People need to live a good life, so you don't want them. So the small hole was to ensure that the little ones could go, the tamariki could go, but the big ones who you could take, were allowed to be taken, But then in saying that, there were a lot of ceremony that needed to take place, even with building a pātuna, even with going out and setting the hinaki, because you would do that according to the maramataka. So again, there's certain like practical ceremonies, I would say, that needed to be observed in order to do and participate in these things. And then also you needed to give your first catch to maru. So maru is an atua that was brought over on the Aotea Waka, and is an atua that looks after the waterways and all of the rivers within the Wanganui River. So you did give something back, we give the first catch to Tangaroa. Same thing. Yeah. So that's how that's like how the engineering, as I understand it, with no engineering background, I understand Te Pāarua and pātuna. I'm excited of the prospect that one day I might, in my lifetime maybe, or even my if I have tamariki, maybe their generation might see one again on the river. That is like my dream. To be able to see one again would be amazing. Like that would be so good. Now the reason why they were taken down is for steam engines, unfortunately. And because of the Tongariro River scheme, which is the dam that's higher up, the Wanganui River, and just the general reason as to why the Wanganui River got taken and confiscated was for the hydroelectric dam. And so to make way for all of those things, all of our kai sources, which would have been Pātuna, Te Pāurua, and also, as I talked about before, Utupiharo. Utupiharo is kind of similar, but has a really different engineering. It's in reverse to a Pātuna, like it has its own thing, you know. They were all taken down for steamboats to make way, and also gravel extraction. So one of the things though that I love about my people is that they were able to take these oral traditions, these engineering feats around Te Pāurua, and put them into Te Awa Tupua, which is the legal personhood of the Wanganui River. So if you go through that legal document, if you ever have the chance to, which I did, no legal background, just having a look, you know, you'll find that actually it's written in a way that's full with oral traditions. It's filled with oral histories. It's filled with waiata, wakatoki. And Te Pāurua in there is about succession. The idea of Te Pāurua for our people is that it is the conceptual framework for succession. How do we create an infrastructure that can withstand the mighty floods that might come in autumn? You know, so that's how Te Pāurua still carries on and reanimates itself. Even if it's not physically here, the modi of it still exists, and it still exists within Te Awa Tupua, the legal framework. Yeah. So yeah, I get very passionate about Te Pāurua. I hope that I get to see it one day. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that you had an opportunity to engage in some hinaki, like trying to build a hinaki or rangatahi of your marae. How was that?
Yeah, the rangatahi are way better. They are great, you know, because it's like when I was learning instruments when I was young. I could pick it up fast, you know, but you know, you kind of lose, I guess, the dexterity you once had. But the kids picked it up great. So they were able to weave hinaki. But through their weaving, so I just want to give a shout out to Natalie Jones and Matthew McIntyre Wilson. So Matthew McIntyre Wilson and Natalie, been working tirelessly to really revitalize hinaki making. They started off with kupenga, and then they moved on to hinaki. And it was through meeting them that I was able to get them into wānanga with a group of rangatahi from my hapu called Te Moruhu Whenua. And through that, they were able to, we were seeking funding really to get them to revitalize hinaki again. And hinaki are fishing nets, but they're the specific fishing nets you would put attached to Te Pāurua. And there are different styles. Now, I had also been blessed with this opportunity to go into the Wanganui Regional Museum and photograph and digitize some hinaki. And there's a long process to a hinaki to making it. But what I learnt in the museum was that all of our tūpuna had different styles, and nobody really adhered to, like, there were certain conventions and rules around the weave, but everyone had their own styles, and it all came out a little bit different. So there were two specific styles. There was one where it's quite straight. I forgot the name of it, but it's like it's kind of like squares. They look like identical squares. And then there's another one called the ripeka, which is all crosses. So these were two prominent styles that were mostly coming up. And then there were the preparation for it, though. You would have to actually get akakia, which they kind of remind me of, they reflect tamariki to me. Hopefully I'll explain this properly, but in my view, akakia, you'll see them, they sprout and they hang on trees. They need trees to grow. They need trees to live. And it's kind of how I think about tamariki. You know, they need whānau, they need trees to help them to grow. That's how I kind of think about akakia to me as tamariki. So they sit on trees. And anyway, you would grab them, you'd cut them down, harvest, keep some there so they can still grow. But you take some down. And what you would use is the aerial shoots of the akakia. You would strip them with kariwo, the vine.
Mm.
And then that would reveal a really strong fiber. And that's actually what you use to make hinaki.
Mm.
And they grow everywhere on the Whanganui River. So it was not so much anymore, unfortunately, due to other things, colonisation being one of them, but mostly harsh agricultural activity and intensity within the area. So a lot of that natural forest, that first gen forest is, very scarce. But that's what you would use, and you would start with the opening and then weave in, and you had to soak it so that it was more pliable. And then there were writings about how we didn't try this, but there were writings about how some of our tūpuna would smoke them because the smoking helps the tuna. It attracts the tuna.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So
Good
when
to hear.
yeah, they like that smoky taste. But when I was writing, when I was figuring out all the stuff about hinaki, I was like, I will remember I woke up at 3 a.m. and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the thing for my thesis. That's the thing for my thesis. That's what I'm going to use to write a kaupapa Māori like music framework, really, to analyze waiata with. I was like, it's all hinaki. It's all there. It's all with our kai.
Mm.
Um, and so the idea was that different parts of the hinaki would become different parts of how you should think about waiata, or how you should analyze waiata, or ways that you could compose waiata, ways that you could pass on older waiata. What kind of ethical considerations would you make? And I tried to align them as best as I could to how you would make a hinaki. So
Mm.
basically, I wrote an instruction manual on how to make a hinaki without showing how to weave it. Couldn't tell you how to do that. But, I did that, but then also tried to follow it as closely to waiata and trying to create succession infrastructure. So it goes back to Te Pāorua, the vision of Te Pāorua. It's always about like, how do I make healthy succession strategies for future generations that they don't have to do the intellectual labor. It's all done for them. That's what I want. I want them to be like, oh, they can just get up and do it. I did all that stuff for them, and then they can just do it. Because when I was doing my PhD, I was so sad that there was nobody else who had written about kaupapa Māori music or waiata, or ways to analyze waiata, ways to think about waiata. All of it was Western art music. All of it was contemporary pop music. All of the analysis that you would use is not of our own. And I was like, oh, it would have been so handy if somebody wrote this, And I was like, okay, well, I've got to write that. And so I used the hinaki, I used kai as kind of the inspiration for it. Yeah.
Mm. Beautiful. I'm thinking a lot about so I guess like my with intergenerational intimacies and writing the paper, I'm like hearing a lot of similarities in the sense that like my like leading up to like the last 2 or 3 years, I would say like nutrition was the dominant way that I understood and related to Kai.
Mm.
And it occurred to me like that kāri tino Māori te rā tirohanga, so that nutrition it's not our way, or it doesn't encompass, it couldn't even begin to kind of like capture what Kai means to us. And so I think in order for me to really understand what our expansive relationships with Kai could look like, that's how the paper came about, was through, I suppose, really critiquing the dominance of these Western frames of seeing and understanding and knowing, and saying, well, actually, like our whānau know this, our tūpuna know this, they have had extensive relationships with Kai, and that sounds like similar, similar to what you're doing really, is you're taking music, and because I bet a lot of us relate to music through a dominant Western view, whether we are, engaging in music from a career standpoint or whether we're just listening or um, and so it's really beautiful, I suppose, to hear the way that you're creating something that's from us, and that's from our knowing, and from our understanding for the mokopuna of Wanganui, but for us as, te iwi Māori. And yeah, I suppose that's where kaupapa Māori comes in, and shout out to decolonizing methodologies for giving us all the insight, I think, to really grab at the roots of our thinking and to really like interrogate where our ways of seeing the world are informed by, and challenging us to see differently and to see with our tūpuna and with our mokopuna. Yeah, do you have any like thoughts on just on that process? And yeah, because it's just something I've been reflecting on a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree with it's like I yeah, the parallels of you're thinking about Kai in the nutritional sense and that like just the dominant default, I call it factory setting
Mm,
of, when you're doing your bachelor's and whatever have you, you're kind of learning the factory setting of that discipline. You're kind of learning the default setting. And usually the default setting is frameworks, ways of thinking, ways of doing stuff that are not really in line with us as a people, how we come to know things culturally, how do we come to know things from a te ao Māori perspective. So it's quite, and sometimes you'll find them in conflict or in tension most of the time, but in other times you might see some cross collaboration. You might see something, and those do happen. So I don't want to not
mm,
acknowledge that sometimes those do happen. But yeah, from like just from like the studying of music, predominantly it's all in, as I said and hinted before, it's all in Western art music. So it's just classical music. It's opera, Gregorian chant, as somebody else cracked up and said to me the other day when I was talking about Western art music. Like it's all of those, that kind of music. Opera, orchestral music, symphony music. That's how we would describe Western art music. Then we have contemporary popular music, which is like top 40, your top 40. Jazz is somewhere around there. It's been kind of that has a whole history of being taken by Black musicians and reappropriated in white institutional settings. And then other music. Unfortunately, we've been cast in other music, and other is something that actually in decolonizing methodologies, as you said before, gave us the kind of tools and thinking around the problem with the other. Sometimes we, as Māori, are called the other, Indigenous people, and our ways of doing things are otherized and
mm,
therefore racialized and then stigmatized.
mm,
So it kind of just realizing that this is just an inappropriate analytical framework for looking at what our waiata, quite quickly, and going, we need to come up with something else. And so, yes, decolonizing methodologies really was the gateway for me to start conceptualizing how would we think about our own kaupapa Māori music, which has kind of led me to where I am today and something that I'm looking into at the moment. Shout out to HRC. And
mm,
so, in terms of kaupapa Māori methodologies, though, what it's allowed me to do is that it became the kind of overarching methodology. So if any of you are even going to study, think about it like this. Kaupapa Māori at the top, you can use it. And basically it's quite expansive, and you can draw on things that you want and that you think are appropriate for your people and things that maybe are not. It's all good, right? So you have this thing, this top layer, and then it gives you the ability to draw on matauranga a iwi, matauranga a hapu. So you can draw on knowledge of your hapu, you can draw on knowledge of your iwi, and that actually gave me the opportunity to draw on te awa tupua, our legal personhood framework and research. Kaupapa Māori allowed me to, it opened the doors for me to think about knowledge systems that exist at a local level, but then just more broadly within te iwi Māori, te ao Māori. So I think, if you are going on this exploration of kaupapa Māori, I highly recommend giving decolonizing methodologies a whiz. It's really great. But it does open your mind to thinking about, okay, like music, kai, the knowledges around it are not universal, but we're told that these should be universalized. And usually the universalization of it is the default setting, which is mostly white,
mm,
cis, able body. It's very much a very confined way that the default setting is.
mm,
And we'll often find that it's in tension with our ways of doing and knowing. And it's in all aspects, music, waiata, and kai. It's in everything. So it's kind of it's an intellectual exercise to try and spot it out and to try and go, yeah, no, this ain't good for us. Yeah.
yeah. Kia ora. And I think like sometimes it just starts with a gut feeling that, oh, actually this is not a vibe.
Yeah, saying that.
Not a
Yeah.
vibe. And then you got to go, whai whakaaro, as Moana Jackson says, follow the
Mm,
thought. Yeah, and see where you end up. And I think, yeah, as you've talked about, I think our tūpuna hold a lot for us and
mm,
they've held a lot for us. And it's up to us to ruku kia rā mātauranga. So to dive deep into those archives that they have left behind. Um, I've got just a couple questions. We might run slightly over time, but if you can stay, that's awesome. If you have to go, kei te pai hoki tēnā. Um, but I'll just share some of the questions from the chat. Can you talk to music and waiata as mātauranga and hitori of events versus entertainment, which is how it's predominantly seen today?
yes, I'm very much a weak, like, cognizant, like, love performance. I love kapahaka. I love it all, right?
Mhm.
But also, it's a specific kind of performance setting. It's a specific type of social context for music for our waiata to be performed. So, some things to think about is that there are some really amazing writings of some of my old people, and also hilariously by what's his name? Edward Wakefield, I think is his name, talking about Wanganui Uri on the Wanganui River. And he talked about how everyone was just singing. He was
Mhm.
like, why is everyone singing all the time? Like, what's going on there? Like everything. So something that what I got from that was like, well, waiata is a part of all Māori lifeways. We sung when we were fishing, we sung when we were on the waka to keep in time. That's called tuki waka, a type of waiata form. Um, we sung as instructions, is functional, it was very practical, and also it was very ordinary.
Mhm.
This idea of music being an entertainment centerpiece is actually derived from the West. It's actually quite, and class and gender are extremely tied to the ways in which music is engaged with,
Mhm.
especially in Europe. So, that's why I think that there is just kind of this tension of like, what is performance and what is everyday waiata. Waiata is ordinary. It's a great thing. We use it every day and we should be using it and thinking about it more as an everyday thing that we do because our tūpuna did. This idea of it being entertainment and a centerpiece is kind of actually a new iteration of it. But then in saying that, I love performances. Now, people did do performances. People did perform in kapahaka and perform, so that was also part of waiata. So waiata can take on many forms in different social contexts. So I hope that answers the question.
Beautiful. Awesome. Um, Here's another question. Broadly speaking, from your research, are there some key themes around how kai appears in our waiata? I'm wondering if our tupuna sang about harvesting, preparing, eating, the different stages of how we relate to kai.
Yes, there were. So there are lots of waiata that are recorded around tuna from the Wanganui River because that was mostly our kai source. So it will differ in different areas. So my husband's iwi kaitahu have a very famous waiata, a manutiria, which talks about a specific kumara that grows in Kaitahu Te Waipounamu.
Mm.
And then I learnt a waiata that was, I think, written and compiled by Tamaho Robe about all the tuna species that inhabit the Wanganui River. And also their migration out to Tonga. They respawn in Tonga and then they come back.
Mm.
So you can think about waiata as recipes. You can think about the ways of which we can think about them as instructions for planting. Again, like waiata has many functions. It's not just entertainment, not only just entertainment, but it's also just giving us those life instructions for everyday things,
Mm.
everyday things. And we all have the ability to access waiata. We can all compose our waiata. Even if your te reo Māori is not strong, find someone who's strong in it and ask them if they can look over some words for you or write it in te reo Pākehā and see how you go workshop it. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be something that anyone who's Māori should have access to waiata. I really believe that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Um, okay, we've got two more questions and then we might wrap up.
Okay.
Um, what was both, what was some of your highlights and the impact that you see in your life now as you traverse this waiata space? What would be your top three takeaways for those learning about this kaupapa, the kaupapa of waiata, I guess?
Top three takeaways. That a waiata should be accessible. That's my takeaway, is that it should be accessible for everyone. Everyone should, have a go. I also think that just about music more generally, music should be accessible for everyone. Music has historically, especially in Europe, been tied to class and gender. And I just think that, it's no good. Our people made it accessible for everybody. And so we should be able to access waiata. So that's my takeaway, is accessibility to waiata. Waiata for me has actually been a really good, helpful way to remediate te reo Māori language trauma. I wasn't given, my dad could speak te reo, but, due to harsh assimilationist times, he couldn't. And that's something, that trauma that rests with him. But, I'm going to try and help that, not continue that. But waiata has been helpful because I've been able to compose now, and I've been trying to and putting my te reo to the test. And so it really does help to mitigate. I think it has very healing properties when it comes to language trauma. And then it also has healing properties. This is the third takeaway, to myself as a Māori person, as wahine Māori, cisgender Māori woman. I just feel more empowered in myself when I'm learning waiata, when I'm performing waiata, when I'm trying to integrate it into my everyday life. It's reaffirmed myself. And I think that it should deliver that for other people as well.
And for those that are not so musically inclined, I think because for us, we have our moteatea, that's less about tone. So is that what you also mean when you talk about waiata being accessible? It's not about being the Beyonce of the whānau, but anyone can engage in waiata. Do you have any, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I know. And there's a lot of, I think, wakama, there's a lot of shame that has been, wrongly put on people who are not musical within our whānau. Oh, that person can't sing. We've heard some of them, and then they're really come on into whānau. It's just not fun. It's what are you doing? We should be encouraging more people to sing, because everyone can sing. This is also the thing. Everyone can sing. It's actually not something you're just born with. You actually have to train yourself to sing better, It's something you work at. It's an instrument. It just happens to be within your tinana. So it's something you need to work at. But in terms of what you're saying with tone, with harmony, with melody, one of the big parts of our music theory as Māori is that those sonic things are not as important as the lyrical content. The whakapapa and the kōrero of the lyrical content is the most important. If you get those things right, who cares about the sonic aspects? If you add a key, it doesn't matter. Even this idea of octaves or keys or being in key, that's a very Western idea about how we frame music harmonically. So we didn't even have the same harmony as harmonic music of Europe, most notably German art music of the 18th century. So these are things to just think about. Just singing is important. Don't focus so much on how you sound. Just focus on, have I got the kupu right? Have I got the kōrero right? Do I understand where this waiata comes from? And am I getting the kōrero right? Am I getting the kaupapa of the waiata right? Those are actually the things you should be focusing on. Do I know this waiata within my body? That's how you should be thinking about it, not tone. Don't worry about it. Doesn't matter.
Beautiful. I'm sure lots of people will be happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I hope they really take that to heart, because e tikana waiata is normal for us, and everyone should have access to it. I think we'll just start to wrap up here, but I think what Meri's kind of shared with us today is the opportunity to dive into the archives of our waiata, the waiata of our whānau, and the waiata of our hapu, and there might be things in there that we don't even know we're looking for. So I really want to encourage you to look into those archives. What are the songs that you actually already know that you just haven't thought deeply about and now have the opportunity to do so? And I think also, if we're talking about waiata as memory, like what is the memory? What is the memory that we're leaving for future generations? Are we composing waiata, like our tūpuna did? And I think so much about these big data systems, and we're trying to rely on these systems that still exist in the physical world, and there are still limitations to Google Cloud and all these spaces. So in the absence of all these Western technologies, what is the technology that we use to ensure the continuation of our mātauranga? And I think waiata is a beautiful, joyful example of a technology that our tūpuna have used for many generations. And I hope that we as whānau will continue to use moving forward. So I think just to maybe like wrap up on a light note, I would love to hear if you could, in this moment, be listening to a waiata and also eating a particular kai. It's the combo of the two. Also, those in the chat, if you'd like to share like a great moment that you could think of that you'd be listening to a certain song and eating a certain kai, please share. But yeah, Meri, what would yours be?
I was eating a certain kai. So my mum makes a sick tamarind chicken. It's a Malay dish. I'd be eating that. I got some. And then if I could be listening to waiata, oh, this is hard. There's so many to choose from. Um, you know what? That boy performance from Angitu, I'd be listening to that. That was so good that they performed. Bloody great. I'd be listening to that.
So good, so good. I think mine would be Boil Up, and it would be listening to our whānau album, which is kind of cheating because there's 13 entire songs on there.
It's an album. That's an album. That's great. That's so good.
Exactly. Just, yes, full of so many beautiful memories. And yeah, wow. Time is not linear, whānau. It is
Mhm.
all swirling around. And but yeah, I just want to mihi ka tika ki a koe, Meri. I've so enjoyed our conversation today. And it's so fun to generate knowledge in the context of conversation because so much of it's like you got to prepare and then say this and say that. But I've really enjoyed my time speaking with you. And I accept the challenge of writing waiata for our mokopuna. You'll be hearing about it in your voice notes sometime soon.
Right, yes, I welcome it. I welcome it. I love it.
But yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody that came today and shared some of your beautiful kōrero about waiata and your whānau. Um, and we've just put out a poll to gather any feedback. And is there a way that they can follow Meri, if you just want to close, is there a way that they can follow your work or if people want to, yeah, see more of the amazingness that is Meri Haami?
Well, thank you. And also, kanohi te mihi kia koutou for all of the chat and the kōrero that's been coming. And I've been reading as I've been going about all these memories that are associated with waiata and kai, and it's just been so good, so joyous. And I'm so happy that everyone shared and thankful. And thank you for having me, Haylee. Again, I said this time, I'm just honored to be asked to be here. But you can find me on all of the social medias. I can't tell you that I'll be on them actively, but you can find me. I'm on the Bird app now, X, Meri Haami. I'm on Instagram. I'm super private though, but you can try Budge if you want to get in there. What else? That's probably it. I'm not really, but you can find me on those socials. I usually post, when I've got a new publication out, when I'm doing stuff. But most of the time, it's my dogs and me gaming. So if you're happy to see that and then some stuff, no my hard mine.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. What was I going to say? I was going to say something, but anyway, I'm going to wrap us up with karakia. But before I go, if you want to know more about Meri's work, please engage. There are a few webinars that are publicly available and shorter papers if you can't engage in her thesis. But yeah, So much to look through. Yeah, e mihi ana ki a koe mea o mahi nunui, whakahirahira hohonu hoki, e Meri. Thank you so much for spending time with us today and everybody who came along. So I'll close us off in karakia. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki tūru tapu nui, kia wātea, kia māma te ngākau, te tinana te wairua, ki te ara takata. Koe ara e rongo whakairi ake ki runga, kia tīna, tīna. Haumie, huie, tae ki e. Tēnā koutou.
Mai ko marama, ka marama I roto, ka tia ho ki waho, hei kai tia ki mauri ora e. Ka marama